All right, hey everyone. I'm joined here today with Dakota Shipton. We're going to learn a little bit about him. So let's go ahead and start off with just where you arm wrestle out of, who you train with, and what your favorite accomplishment so far is in arm wrestling.
Okay, for those of you that don't know me, I feel like most of you will. Dakota Shipton. I arm wrestle out of Red Deer, Alberta with the Red Deer Club, although I'm really all over Alberta. I go all over, hit as many clubs as I can. I train with Edmonton Club. I'm down in Calgary sometimes, Lethbridge. I want to get down to Medicine Hat, haven't been there yet, but Red Deer is where I originate from. And I mean, just a lot of good arm wrestlers there. What was the second question? Sorry.
Who are the main people that you train with?
Yeah, so I mainly train with Matt Mask, Sean Crother, all the other guys at the Red Deer Club, Zach Monroe, Brian Parliament when he shows up. There's a lot of good guys there. I'm honestly convinced that we probably have one of the best clubs in Western Canada, if not the best club. I would put us up there with the Ottawa Club for probably the best club in Canada. They got pretty good depth there with Devon as well, but as Matt and Devon are the best two arm wrestlers in Canada, I would argue that they have the best two clubs as well.
Oh, yeah, the average level of your club is pretty high. I was talking to a lot of different people about the way their club formats fit, and I think it's pretty interesting. Like Clifton Erickson, he trains out of a small group with like six different people, but they're all crazy, like Jake Houston, Nathan Johnson himself, and a couple other guys that are really good. They just don't compete as much yet. And then you have like really big clubs, like you said, like Ottawa, or your club's actually pretty big too. What do you think the benefits are of having like a bigger, larger, more diverse group like what you guys have?
Well, I guess I'll start off with the other side of the coin, like when you talk about Clifton, because I did watch you guys' interview. I think that his way of training is beneficial in some ways. When you do it properly, you have the weights hooked up, are training with certain guys, and you're kind of learning how each other arm wrestles, and you get a better in-depth learning on it. And then I think from that, you can really start picking apart people's weaknesses. Whereas on the other side of the coin, with what I have, is I think it's better just because I go to a practice, and if there's 20 people there, then all of a sudden there's 20 arms that I can grab onto. There might be new guys who I've never arm wrestled before, but I still have my core group of guys who know how I arm wrestle. And it's like a small group within a group. Whereas I feel like the smaller clubs don't have that group within a group. There's just a group. But if I try something and I want to know how it's working, and there's someone who's super strong, maybe hasn't arm wrestled me before or is newer, I can go and explain to him that I want to try this and see how a newer arm wrestler would react, or someone who hasn't arm wrestled me much would react. And I think that's very beneficial. The nice thing about Red Deer too is there's a lot of guys who are good who just don't show up all the time. So if I'm consistently showing up for a couple weeks, there might be a guy who I couldn't do anything against in a certain move, 5 weeks ago. But now that I've been training that for 5 weeks and he shows back up and all of a sudden I can top roll him, whereas before I couldn't top roll his cup. That now tells me that I'm progressing. And in arm wrestling, I think
I
knowing
love that feeling.
I was going to say, I think knowing that you're progressing in this sport is an awesome feeling, because there's a lot of times where if you train with the same guys and you all constantly get better at the exact same time, you can really feel like you're stagnant, you're not moving, you're not getting any better. Whereas when you compare yourself to people you don't always arm wrestle, you're getting much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's one issue that I feel like there for a long time in our club, it was kind of like the same guys and everyone was really consistent. So you were always wondering, like, are we all stagnating? Or are we all getting a little bit better? Are we all, because, when you're pulling the same guys over and over, it's usually, you don't just suddenly leap ahead or like way far back or whatever. So having that little bit of contrast, and now that our group is growing, then you do kind of see those changes, especially because I had some pretty bad injuries last year that I've only really gotten like four table practices since November,
Mhm.
but coming back and feeling people who have improved and then seeing the improvements that I've made versus a lot of people just in terms of like strength, that's been really cool. And I definitely really value that now. And I want to kind of start training, or not training, but traveling to different clubs more often now, just so that way I can get that constant like rotation of different hands and be like, oh, well, I couldn't do anything like what you said, before to him last time, but now I can top roll or I can go inside or whatever. Definitely 100% agree with you there.
Yeah. And I think I'm lucky too because I had an extra layer to that onion in a sense, whereas I travel around quite a bit. Like, you see me all over, but just in the sense of even other clubs like Edmonton Extreme Arm Wrestling Club. I'm in Edmonton a ton, so I train with them guys when I can. Like I was saying about Calgary, Lethbridge. And so I'm there, at least once every 6 months down to Lethbridge and stuff. Lately with Montana, I feel like I've been there once every 3 months. So I just stop in Lethbridge on the way there. But yeah,
Hey, we're doing big things down here right now.
oh man, you know what? I think it's really cool because I remember Brian and I a while ago we were talking. We're like, man, like Montana's right there. Like, what do they got for talent? And then we ended up Dion and Miles. I remember they were like first one of the two first guys I met. Dion came up to a tournament, started talking about things, and then the way it started for me actually was Josh Wilson invited Matt down to a practice, and I tagged along with Matt, and I got to know all the guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of what started this whole thing, which I think is super cool looking back on it now.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that because, obviously everyone's talking about Matt and stuff like that, but then they're like, oh yeah, and there's this Dakota guy, he's pretty good. And yeah, so you got to hear a lot about you even before the kind of more formal time that we met at Armsgeddon. And I think we might have did we get crossover at Garage Wars or no?
I don't remember. I pulled Josh Wilson there. I'm not sure if you were there.
That's right. That was like the only week I didn't come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was like my first match in Montana. And I remember because I didn't know who I was going to pull, but I told them I wanted to do Garage Wars. And that was my first time having a format where like you find out the week before who you're competing against. But then I found out the names on the list or whatever, and then I was like, oh, I don't know who I'm gonna be pulling. And then he told me there was
Yeah.
changes and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be crazy. So that was super fun.
Yeah. And Josh is kind of one of those fun guys to pull because like he has lanes that he definitely needs to work on, but if you move into like one of his strong lanes, then it's like all of a sudden, there's like a lot of power there that you're not expecting. You're like, oh,
Dude,
okay, I need to move out of here real quick.
he thinks I'm a big sandbagger, and like I am in a sense, but more or less, like I stylistically match up really well against him. So when I
Yeah.
first came down with Matt and we pulled, like I'm not the type to fight you in practice. I will kind of go where you want to go. I want to work on all my general strengths. I will kind of work on my main strengths. Like even if I'm in a hook with somebody, I can still work on my rise and pronation. I can still work on all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to do the center table fighting. I'm not going to do all that stuff that's training because in a practice, I want to arm wrestle with as much pressure on my arm as much as I can. To me, that just seems like the most beneficial and efficient way to practice. There are times when you have to learn the setup. I do agree with that, but I work on that specifically with my team. And I think it works really well because you can see, like, even when Josh Wilson talks about our match, he's like, I didn't really have anything in the setup. It was completely different. Whereas if I fought Josh Wilson in the setup of practice 6 or 7 times, he now knows what I'm going to do. Things like that. So, yeah.
No, that is kind of just the way it is. And I'm thinking, I don't know if you're the same way, but for me, like at practice, I can't hit. Like it's rare that I go to a practice and I actually have my hit available to me. I usually just kind of like catch people or play a little bit more defensively. I can only hit hard like if it's a tournament or like a live match. I need that like adrenaline to I feel like I'm like maybe 20 or 30% weaker without it being a real match. If there's nothing on the line, I can't get in that place I need to be to actually hit really hard.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm the same way in a sense. Like, I feel like when the lights are shining, I'm walking down the stage, like whoever's there cheering me on, people are high-fiving me, like things like that. I really think that it's just something that help. I just like to say lock in, lets me lock in. Because even like my dad, like he's usually a good gauge for me. And like when I'm doing ready goes before a match, he always says that I feel like 15-20% stronger. He says it's hard to explain. But like right before Dalton, I remember like I just felt so good. And I was like, Dalton's awesome. I was so nervous, but I was like, you need to be a really good arm wrestler to beat me tonight. That's how I felt.
Yeah. It's really interesting. We talk about that a lot at our club, and I don't necessarily think even some of the, like the really long old like veterans and pros really have an answer for it, but I feel like arm wrestling's so unpredictable because there's days where like you're just so much stronger for like no reason, and it almost makes no sense. And there's other days where you might feel like really great, but then you get on the table and it's like there's just nothing there. Like it's so hard for me to predict how my performance is going to be in arm wrestling. Do you think you've kind of found a way to like make that a little bit more consistent, or is it still kind of a little bit of a mystery for you too?
I know what you mean with the mystery thing. I think I break it down into a few factors. I look at it from a mental standpoint. So I think you need to have a genuine belief in yourself deep down that whoever you're competing against, you can beat them. Whether that becomes from you having to sit and watch film on their worst match they've ever had, where someone who you're beating is beating them, but just whatever you need to do to mentally tell yourself, I am in this match is the first thing. Physically, I like to get lots of sleep. I like to do like day before, day of, even for this arm bender, because we're going to have to do like a little kind of weigh-in thing before. I'm sure I'm going to be interviewing a few people, things like that. But I'm going to like, I wear my long sleeves. I have my, chill clothes on. I'm just preserving energy. I'll try and sleep as much as I can the night before. When I wake up the day of, I have a really good breakfast, and then I'm just kind of chilling. I like to get some electrolytes in my system beforehand. Like if you see me around, usually like especially even before Armageddon, I think I drank like 3 Gatorades before I go. And I like the Gatorade you guys have down there in Montana too, because you guys have a bit more sugar. And I don't know what it is, but I like to kind of sugar load myself a little bit too, because then I burn that, is it glycogen or glucagon,
Yeah,
whatever it is, right off the
glycogen.
bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, glycogen right off the bat. And then I feel like it actually helps in my endurance. I think that's
Well, we
all
have all those
mental.
good ingredients that you guys ban up there.
Yeah. Oh, I know, right? Uh, yeah, States is doing it right now. Anyways, we'll see what
There's
happens with.
Gator Light now too.
Yeah, Gator Light's crazy. We just have Gatorade up here, and then we had like
Yeah.
nothing else for a while.
I think I remember seeing like in because I know supplements are really touchy in Canada. And I think I remember seeing that you guys aren't even allowed to buy like multivitamins or like potassium or magnesium over the counter, that it's like you have to have a prescription or something even for basic stuff like that.
Well, you can, but it's just not to the dose, like the dosages that you guys have down there. Like, there's a lot more restrictions. So, like, an over the counter here is like however many milligrams, whereas like in the States, you could probably find it for cheaper and double the milligram dosage, right? Even with like
And before
pound.
I forget, there's one thing I wanted to bring up that you kind of touched on a second ago that was really interesting to me. Not a lot of people have to deal with this. So in competitions where you're doing double duties, so you're pooling and commentating, like how does that affect your mindset, or how do you feel like that actually affects how you pool or your performance? Because I feel like to me, I would want to choose either one or the other because I like to do the best job I can. And I think it would really, for me personally, I think thinking about the commentating or having that in the back of my head, what I want to say might really interfere with getting in the proper mindset to get on the table and pool.
Yeah, I mean, I look at like if I'm being completely honest, I look at it from two standpoints. I look at it from me as a competitor standpoint, and then I look at it from myself as a business standpoint. So I mean, if I'm coming down already and I'm competing, I think it's a great opportunity for me to get to commentate these matches and to get my name out there more, show these higher promotions that I am good at commentating, that they might want to have me. So I think it kind of like gives me an edge in that sense. Like I'm commentating RVJ and Sandras. That match is going to be everywhere. The fact that I'm going to be the voice behind that, I think is a super awesome opportunity that I'm really thankful for. And I think that if I do a good job and there's a lot of people watching that match and they go, who commentated that? Like, we want that guy. So I look at it from that perspective and I go, okay, it's really good. From a competitor standpoint, I always tell the people holding the event, I'm like, listen, I need 2 or 3 matches before my match where I just need to get kind of settled and locked in. It's as long as I have those couple matches beforehand, I don't look at it as a big deal, because really the matches before that, instead of just kind of hanging out and getting ready, talking to people, I just get to focus on arm wrestling and talk about it, which I think is always fun. If someone were to say, though, I want you to commentate the match before your match, I would say there's no chance, because I have like things I like to go through and that I like to do beforehand, and that would just throw me off. But again, I think I have a really good sense of when I need to kind of turn it on and just, enjoy the show, really. So I always find that fun.
Yeah, I think you're a good natural conversationalist, and you think quick, like you're quick on your feet with your statements, or when you need to kind of like kind of pivot on a subject. So I think that lends really well to your ability to commentate, because I think when I'm watching like a lot of other productions like around the country, and some of the people they pick for commentating, it gets a little, it's like timing is really important. And I really appreciate that you kind of like know how to do like that, the pacing and the flow and when to move on, even if you haven't finished your point necessarily. Whereas like you watch other productions and they just can't stop until they get every single one of their, and it's kind of like too much, it's like everyone wants to show off how much of an expert they are, but realistically the fans don't care. Like they're either seasoned arm wrestlers who don't need the in-depth, or they don't know enough that all that is even necessary. So I actually really have liked what you've done when you've been up there so far.
Thank you. And yeah, I like, not to toot my own horn too much, but I would agree. And I think that especially with arm wrestling and commentating, you need to have a good knowledge of it, but you also need to understand like a top roll takes maybe 4 seconds if executed properly from like ready to go. So there's no sense of me sitting there for 5 minutes going into round 5 talking about, Hunter's top roll in round 1. Like you go on it, you cover it, you get what you need to say, you wrap it up, especially when there's 2 or 3 guys commentating. Like I like to do the play-by-play in the sense. I like to talk about the competitors. I like to talk about what I'm seeing in the match. But I think from an arm wrestling commentating perspective, it's a little bit different than any other sport because it is so fast that you just need to really talk about what is going on at that point. Like I'm like, okay, he's putting his hand over his knuckle. The referee's telling him to lower it. Oh, we're going now. You can come back on some dead time later on and explain, like when their referees are applying the strap, you got a minute, 2 minutes to talk about that topic you didn't finish earlier that a fan may be wondering about. Like, oh, why did they restrap? Oh, okay, well, they restrap because of this. But when things are going on, you need to cover it because, like in basketball, in a sense, I'll use that as an example. When they hit a 3, the commentator talks about the 3 that's hit, but that's like the exclusive, intense moment. Whereas like the arm wrestling, because the setup is so important and because like after the go is so important, it's all like an intense, exclusive moment that needs to be covered.
Speaking of traditional sports, one thing I really like that they do that I think there's a lot of space in arm wrestling to do, and you might be seeing some stuff soon. I'm not going to go into too much details, but like for instance, in baseball or golf, like they have like little trackers on the screen that show kind of like what's going on and what people are doing with lines and whatnot. Well, another thing that I really want to see, and I think it'll help commentating a lot and the flow and the pacing, is on-screen timers and then a timer behind the table. So like, let's say competitors have 2 minutes between matches. Well, let's have that clock counting down so that way everyone in the crowd, the competitors can see it, their corner can see it, the people watching from home can see it, and that gives the commentators, they know how much time they have to talk and wrap things up. There's so like, the door is so wide open in arm wrestling right now to really come in and make a statement and find your place. You just have to be willing to do the work and not just plug in a phone and press stream. You know what I mean?
No, I agree 100%. I could sit and talk about this forever, but I think that especially, well, I'll start on the one thing. I think that we're in a day and age where watching the television isn't the same as watching the television, in 2000 or 2005. Because now everyone has the television at their fingertips, and it's not the same as what it was. People are scrolling through apps. They're trying to get like dopamine rushes, like things like that. Like you can't just sit and have people watch. You need things that are exciting. And I think that the more things that you have on the screen, the more interactive things are how people stay involved. I think a timer is great for that. I remember watching WAL and ESPN because my dad was there in 2015, and they had heart rate, like they had heart rate monitors hooked up to the competitors. So when they were arm wrestling, it would show that their heart rate spiked, like things like that. Just things to get people more involved in watching. Because whether we like it or not, there is a lot of dead space in between the arm wrestling and stuff. But I think that, like you said, baseball, golf, they're also sports with a bunch of dead time. They just have good commentators and they have a good way of keeping people invested. And I think that we need to do that a little better, and then our sport will take off even more than what it is right now.
That's one thing that I really like what the Red Leg Studio guys are doing, is bringing in, I always forget his Tugboat, the commentator.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's not, he's learning a lot when it comes to arm wrestling, but, he wasn't like some expert that knows everything in and out about it, but it was still so good because his job was to control the pacing, the flow, moving everything, and just having someone like that and be willing to invest. And I love that. And that, like, made me just an instant huge fan of what they're trying to do as well. Just because like no one else is doing that, you know. Everything is from within, but there's so many talents outside the sport that if we bring the right people in key positions, even if they're not the biggest experts and they say something that might be a little off sometimes, it's okay. Like, no, it's not that big a deal, you know?
Yes, and one thing I would add on to that is people who are watching don't like when the commentators are right every single time. Because if you want to be more invested and have people paying attention, then you want to kind of have an ear out. Oh, the commentator just said that. That's completely wrong. Or he obviously, like, he might not know. Then you want to watch and be a little more invested because now you're getting some entertainment through the commentators in a sense. I'm not saying you got to grill the commentator for being wrong, but I'm saying if he asks a question and another commentator answers it, then at the same time, it gets the people thinking about what's going on, which is important. Like when I commentated with him, I learned a lot about how to actually commentate, and he learned a lot through me about actually arm wrestling, and it was a really good duo, and I feel like we both got a lot better from it.
Absolutely. Um, and then I was wondering too, what, in terms of, since we're kind of in the area, in terms of marketing arm wrestling and doing like bringing in more, because I would say right now we have a lot of fans of arm wrestling, but not a lot of fans of arm wrestlers. What do you think? Or because I think a lot of people, where their mind is traditional purist arm wrestling is too slow paced and it's too complicated. Like you kind of have to be, even as an arm wrestler yourself, it takes you months to learn like a lot of the little nuances, why people do certain things and don't. Would you be willing personally, or do you think it's the right answer to maybe compromise a little bit on the integrity of things like the setup and whatever, where maybe you're not always going to get a perfect fair start in order to make it more exciting for the fans? Or do you think there's a way that you can still, you know, appeal to the purists who want very strict arm wrestling, but you know, it's again, it's just going to be tough for for fans, for people who don't live, breathe, and eat arm wrestling to tune in on?
Yeah, I think you can break this down into two things again. I think one depends where you are in the world. When I was in Istanbul, when I was in Dubai, when I was in Amsterdam, those people, because it's like a more, like it's looked at more as like an official sport over there, you can do a purist sport and they enjoy it. They still have fun with it because they understand it more. When you come more to the North American side, where we have all these sports that are already really intense, we have like, I think it is okay to compromise what is kind of going on. And I'll give a shout out to like Ian Carnegie. Like I'm sure you've heard of his Mac League. I think he's doing a really good job right now, kind of showing that you can gain fans without having the complete purist perspective of arm wrestling. He did exactly what you said. He compromised the setup a little bit. It's that WAL, close your thumbs, close your hands, go. Not
Yes.
everybody gets the perfect setup at the start, but really, if both competitors, by the time the hands are closed, aren't complaining, they probably both feel comfortable enough with going. I have pulled in that league, and I will say it's fun, it's fast paced, it's interesting, and they seem to be going up and up with it. I'm very curious to see what they do with that. But I think it's a matter of involving everything. Like, I think if you have a solid team, like I think Red Lake Studios is doing great. Like you were saying, Gelder, all them guys are awesome. I think if you have a solid team, you can still have purist arm wrestling. But I think that there are definitely ways to work around it at the same time and maybe appeal to fans more. But I think everyone should just kind of try and find their mediums and do what they want to do with it. And then the fans will come, especially with like people like Devin. There's more Devin fans than there are arm wrestling fans.
Yeah, there
You know what
is.
I mean? And so
Yeah.
he and Brian Shaw's coming, like all these big bodybuilders are coming in and they're going to bring eyes to the sport. And so I feel like if you're a promotion who is doing things somewhat right and you manage to score some of these athletes who are bringing eyes in, it will come. We're just hitting that point where it's going to take off really soon.
See, and that's where I feel like there's a little bit of another barrier, because I feel like arm wrestling is kind of at that really awkward intersection where I think every kind of niche sport that's coming up into the limelight hits, where a lot of the competitors, especially the high end, like people you see at East First West, I don't want to say that they're not intimidated, but they're still kind of like grasping on to the old ways of doing things. And so you hear like a lot of statements like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not at this level. You blah, blah. Like, you have to understand, like in major sports, football, fans are always going to have opinions, basketball, whatever. And they're not always wrong, but they're not always right. And it doesn't matter. You kind of just have to roll with it. You don't have to get so defensive. But I feel like you see so many athletes just jumping into comments or whatever and saying, you have no clue what you're talking about. Like arm wrestling, you don't know anything about. But it's like, dude, this is a part of fandom. Like you can't just push them all away or tell them that their thoughts are invalid. You see it a lot in boxing, everyone has like, oh man, you should have just ducked here, did this or X, Y, and Z, and boxer, like they learn that it's best just not even respond to that type of stuff, but I think right now we're kind of like in that awkward stage where a lot of people are just trying to really hold on to the past and like almost keep it a thing where the only people who watch arm wrestling is arm wrestlers. But it is such a great sport and it's so exciting that I really hope we evolve past that point. We see more people like as cringy as people say he is, which I totally disagree with. But Camille Jablonski and like
Yeah.
what he does with social media, I think that's like he's putting himself out there in like a way that's relevant to a lot of people. And I wish more people did stuff like him.
Oh, and I agree. And I think that, like you said, with arm wrestling, like you have a really cool opportunity as an arm wrestling athlete that if you're a good arm wrestler and if you're good at promoting yourself, you can become a bigger name in the sport. Or like you can be known by a lot of people in the sport who are at a very high level. And I think that in a lot of other sports, like if you work really hard and you make your way to the NFL, that league is so popular that you automatically become popular from the league. Whereas you're not really going to get into a league in arm wrestling where you become popular because of it. You might be seen by a few more people, but you as a person need to promote and sell yourself in a way where people want to watch you. People always grill me. They're like, Dakota, do you actually think you can beat this guy? Or they're like, do you think, like, don't you think you're overstepping and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I might be overstepping, but me overstepping makes you want to watch me. And then whether you like me or not, when you meet me, you're going to like me. Like, sometimes I say things that are, a bit of a stretch. Or it's like I'm calling somebody out. Maybe I shouldn't be. But at the same point, it's like I'm making you want to tune in. And then when you meet me, you become a fan. So
It's arm wrestling. What if you beat him though?
that's the thing. We just talked about it.
Yeah.
And here's what I know we're not going too in depth in this because everyone always talks about it, but I'm jumping ship for a second. Everyone's always like, oh man, should beat you. He probably should. But what if he has an off day? But I'll tell you what, I know for a fact that I'm coming there and I'm showing up 100%. I'm feeling really strong. I'm going to do everything that I do every single time. And all it takes is for him to have one slip up, be too slow, make one mistake, and that entire train that he's rolling on right now could be derailed.
No, that's 100% true. And I'm really of the same mindset where I like to be the underdog. I like people, despite all my skills, or my actual skills, you'll never hear anything except for I'm the god, I'm the greatest, I'm going to crush everybody I come up against because I have to have that self-belief. And in your match with Miles, you're absolutely like, I was very particular to say in a lot of different matchups that on paper, this is the way that it should be. Technically, like if you look at where they've been, where they're going. And Miles has just been on a tear and he's high atop a lot of people's radars right now, because he's just been nonstop. And like you said, all it takes, is for that one little, and he hasn't really had that off moment yet. So it's going to happen. It has to happen at some point, right? And maybe it does happen on your match, or maybe you've made enough improvements in that time that it doesn't, because we don't really know, we can only infer how much better you've gotten. Maybe you've been able to outwork him. But yeah, like on paper, people say that he should win, but we've talked about it. I think there's very realistic lanes to get into that you have. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see the setup too, because I also think after pulling you guys at Armageddon, I think we don't feel a lot of the ways that you guys get what you want in the setup, and it might be a little bit different for him.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that. The big thing for me with that is just like, I'd say the biggest thing that I rely on is I know I'm going to show up every single time. I see what you mean when you said like Miles hasn't really had that slip up yet. I am going to disagree with you in a sense. I think he has slipped up in matches, but I think he's been so strong that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm not saying I'm stronger than him. I would love to show up stronger than him. Like I know where my lifts are. I don't know where his are, but I know that I've never pulled these lifts before, which really excites me. And I'm trying to gain weight. I'm doing a decent job. It was a lot easier for me to gain weight with Dalton for some reason, but like I'm lighter and my lifts are all better. But the biggest thing with that is I feel like if he makes the mistakes that he's made against other people against me, I will make him pay for it where other people.
Yeah. I do believe that because, I watched a lot of your matches very closely. And also on your podcast, I love the way that Brian put it, where, you and like Jared and a couple other people are just really good at disarming people and taking away some of their power. But when it comes to arm wrestling strengths, I actually believe that fundamentally, like if you were to put you and Miles on a table with a pulley and you did the fundamental arm wrestling lifts, I could completely 100% believe that you would beat him on every single lift. I think when it comes to Miles specifically, it's his hand, like the leverage he gains from putting his not normal, it's not a normal hand.
Oh, I agree.
And so he's able to get these advantages that no one else can really get. So it's gonna be really interesting to see kind of how you deal, because you have gripped up with him, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, in all honesty, like I do think Miles is stronger than me. Like I think if we did a pulley system thing, I think there are lifts he would beat me in, and I think there are lifts I would beat him in, which I think makes this really intriguing as well. But I think a problem that I've seen a lot of people try and do with Miles is they feel what he offers and they get really intimidated by it. And I understand why people do, because when there's a hand that big and there's an arm that long, it can be intimidating. But I argue with a lot of people on that. And I say, but you guys don't, like, you guys got to remember, I train with Matt Mask. Not as much as I have in the past, but I still see him every couple weeks, some weeks, twice a week. And he has a longer lever than Miles. And
For sure.
his hand is comparable. If like his hand's bigger. I get that Miles and him are comparable is what I was saying, but like Matt is genetically more scary than Miles to me, and Matt is also stronger. So to me, it's like I'm used to this in a sense. Like when Matt and I pull, like obviously he's not going 100% against me, but I know what things I have to do to work around him to feel comfortable in the setup to get what I want. And I'm just hoping that if I do those things with Miles, that it will work. And if it doesn't, I'm confident that I'll have other lanes too.
Yeah, no, he's definitely mortal. I think a really good example was if actually at Garage Wars again, is if you saw his match with Brian Johnson. Brian found ways to get in there. He found places where he was able to gain leverage. And Brian Johnson's another guy who's, he's got pretty crazy levers for his weight, but not anything close to like Miles or Matt Mast. But, whenever people kind of say that he's completely invincible or unstoppable, I'm like, no, there's always ways and there's always advantages. Like someone having a longer forearm or a bigger hand doesn't always mean that they have the advantage. Like there's a way with your structure to get an advantage against that person. Like against Miles, I know that like if I get my short little forearm down on his wrist, then he's gonna have to dad's move me essentially, and that's just not gonna happen. So there's always places to find advantages. If you find a way outside of what we kind of talked about privately, then I think that'd be really cool.
Dude, I'm sorry. I always think about this. Like when I lay in bed at night, this is what I think about. I just think about when his wrist actually pops backwards and he palm up and I'm over top of him. And I just like think about how much I want to like look at the crowd and kind of see the reaction. But I'm worried I'd lose it. So, because his press is so good too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and he can press both ways, which is kind of I won't say scary, but like anyone who's like willing to dive sideways like this and not just with their shoulder back, um, it could be because like if you fully commit to that, it's really hard because you get stuck in this angle, especially if you manage to get over the top of his hand, and there's like this, I feel like from like 2 to like 330 ish, for some reason, at least for me or what I see for most people, is it's really hard to generate force from there and actually get the pin unless you like knock him past that point. I don't know. And I was talking to Josh about it too. Like, I think there's so many places that this match might end up. Like, I could see every round being potentially significant, like almost like you would think they were different arm wrestlers pulling, because both of you, from what I've seen, have multiple different lanes that you're comfortable in pulling in. Uh, and I've seen you pull hook in after pulls, and you seem pretty comfortable there too. So, but I don't think I've ever seen you in a super match pull hook. Is that right?
Oh man, not really. I usually always top roll if I can. I always make the joke that I'm a hooker. I could maybe find some footage of like a turn. Well, actually, I just pulled in Edmonton and I pulled the number 10 ranked 220 guy in Alberta, and I like shot like a high top roll and I thought it was a pin and I let off and then he cut me inwards and the referee said no pin and I did pull through him in the hook. Like I'm very confident in my hook. I don't showcase it all the time because sometimes I don't have to. But like that's another thing with Miles because his hand is so good. Normally I am a hand dominant arm wrestler, but you guys might get to see me in the hook. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I think Miles is very hand dominant. I know his arm is good and he's like a strong guy, but I think that I have more chance to match him on arm than I do hand on hand, if I'm being completely honest. Does that mean I'm not going to expose his hand? Absolutely not. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with that. But I mean, in all reality, I think he's genetically very gifted. I think he's probably stronger than me, but I think that I beat him in the speed department. I think I beat him in the endurance department, and I think I beat him in the technical department. So we'll have to see. Strength is the most important by far. Like if you're stronger than someone, it doesn't always matter, especially with the tools he has. That's why he gives so many people issues. But like I said, he's just got a one wrong move and like it could be completely like scary situation for him.
And
Especially if
I
he
did.
presses sideways. Sorry, I keep cutting you off, but I keep thinking about
No, no,
it.
you're totally fine.
If he presses sideways where he's like going like this and his shoulder's not involved, and I have his hand, like I honestly would not recommend that for anyone, to be completely honest. When I'm hitting and I'm hitting sideways like that, like I just yeah. Like I know he's strong and he's got a really good frame, but I think he wants his shoulder behind it. I think he doesn't want to be out there. Cause like in practice, like I pull slow, but like when I'm hitting and I'm trying to like you know what I mean? Like it's just a scary position to be in, I think.
Yeah, I think you're another person where like when I see like footage from like when you guys are just practicing or after pulling versus live pulling, you're just completely different. Like you could just see the way you approach the table, the way that you initiate, you know, the hit or everything like that, completely different. Whereas like if I ever saw your practice puller, I would say I'd probably think that you were a defensive arm wrestler, to be honest, you know, similar to me. Whereas like if anyone's only seen your live pulls, you're definitely like I would say you're an explosive like hitter, more similar to like Hunter Broughton. So I think that's a pretty cool contrast too, because I feel exactly the same way. And I did see that you made a few call outs. Before we get into those call outs though, does does the winning or losing with Miles affect your forward trajectory, or do you already have like a clear path in mind that it doesn't really matter the outcomes? This is like the kind of journey you want to take this year?
I look at it being the age I am in the sport and like where I'm going. I'm like I have end goals in mind and I set really far goals, but I also set small goals. And like as much as I look at it as hills and valleys on my like road that I'm on right now. And on the road I'm on right now, if I beat Miles, it turns into a valley. And in my car, I just drive down it a little faster and I get farther on the road. If I lose to Miles, it becomes a bit of a hill. It's something I have to climb over and deal with. Whether I win or lose to Miles will not affect the two callouts that I made. If I beat Miles, then I think I have some self-evaluating to do on where I am and really take a look at who I should be calling out. And if I lose to Miles, then for me, it's more or less like, okay, Miles is a tank on a trajectory right now that he's just on a path and he's doing the right things. But I don't think it really negatively affects my arm wrestling career at all, which is why I really like this match as much as I do, because some people tell me I'm in the match. Some people tell me I have no chance. But either way, I feel like the general consensus is kind of like what you were talking with Clifton. I think it's like 70-30 for Miles.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't really negatively affect me if I lose at all.
That's true. That's true. But again, sometimes I think taking those, like, at least for me, after every loss, like my approach to training was so intense afterwards that I know I definitely made progress. So there's some kind of benefits to that as well. But I really liked your call outs. Do you want to tell everyone who you called out?
I will in just a second. I just want to jump on what you said for a second. See, and I'm like you, and I saw you talk about this too with Clifton, but I need my goals to train hard. But whether I win or lose this match, I don't think, like, if I lose, there's obviously kind of a fire lit under me. But if I win, there's also a fire lit under me because I'm like, hey, I'm beating these guys now where like I can be calling out some more guys and I need to train hard to be ready for that. Whereas the fact that one of the main reasons why I wanted to pull Miles is because I knew that it was a bit of a reach for me just because of genetically what he's like and the path that he's on. I knew that when the match was made or when people wanted to see the match to the Miles that I'm going to be arm wrestling is going to be completely different. And so I knew that I was going to have to be completely different, which is why I'm super thankful for this match because I'm not the same arm wrestler that I was when I started training. Whether that's enough or not, we're going to find out on the 8th. But no matter the outcome, I'm going to be 10 to 15% stronger than I was when I pulled Dalton. And I think that either way, that's a really fun thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome because your match with Dalton actually was really pretty impressive. You know, Dalton's right hand is, for me, it's, I've never been able to, fresh on fresh, I've never really been able to beat him right arm. So, but I pull him a lot. I pull him almost every week. So I kind of know a good level of where his right is. And, you know, we heard a lot of good things about your guys' club. So coming in when we got the matchups, I think Dalton was one of the people that we were most confident in getting a win, you know? And then when you kind of just completely disabled his hand in the setup and just didn't even really let him get in the match, it was pretty impressive because in this area, he's actually considered probably like would be considered a hand dominant puller, you know? So that wasn't necessarily the lane that we thought that he was going to get beaten in. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, no, I'm happy for that match in general.
And it gave me a lot of ideas for my match.
Oh yeah, perfect. No, that's good. Yeah, no, I mean, when I was getting ready for Dalton, my max back pressure lift, like from like a down pulley, like pulling back towards me, it's like like a belt or whatever, was like it was around 90 pounds, and
Really?
yeah, and as of this week, I'm at 107 point like 5 or something is what it came to. It's it's not like it's not crazy weight, but the fact that I'm like
Progressing.
10% of 90 pounds is 9 pounds. And I'm up whatever it is, 16 pounds or 17 pounds.
For me, it's really hard. I don't like to ever post numbers for anything unless I think it's really easy to reproduce it, because I think, like, if you did back pressure on my table, you might get a completely different number than on however you do the setup or whatever, you know?
100%. And that's why I don't look at people's numbers. Sorry. That's why I don't look at people's numbers. That's why I just look at the progression that I'm making on my pulley.
Yeah, there's just too many different things, like the amount of friction your pulley has. Like, some people count the pin, some people don't count the pin or the chain, or, you know, there's so many different things that can influence the number, where you might say, oh, this guy's got 20 more pounds of back pressure than him. It's like, but does he really? Like, you don't know that. You really don't. Because if people only looked at my numbers, like, people would think I was like, I lift really heavy gym numbers, but I am not an elite arm wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I probably have the worst pulley. Like, no, it's a good pulley. It was made for me a long time ago, but it sat outside for a long time. It's rusty. It's old. I got a WD-40 it before I go. And so that's why, like, I say my numbers. I have no shame in the numbers I say. It could be 40 pounds and I could be happy if it was 35 the week before. But I just say the numbers because I don't see the point in giving fake numbers. And I also just like to let people understand the percentages of where I'm at.
that's all that matters, is, did the number get bigger for what you're doing? You know, that's all that really matters. Like, people shouldn't focus so much on these numbers they're hearing, because, like, they see Gennady and Camille doing 250-pound presses, but was that with like a 2-to-1 pulley, a 1-to-1 pulley? Did they spray it with like, and then here's a pro tip, by the way, instead of using WD-40, get Teflon spray.
Okay.
Cool. It'll make your pulley so smooth.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. But anyways, back to the callouts I made.
Yes,
I
yes.
made one I'll go over the first one I made. That will be a couple weeks after the arm bender, but Jonathan Mercer is his name. We've pulled once before in a tournament. I didn't get the victory at that time. Because I beat Evan Ferguson, he's a number 10 ranked Alberta 220 puller. That puts me in the number 10 spot in the tennis. I was ranked number 7, I believe, in the 198s, but after recent thinking, I've decided that I just want to start moving up the rankings in the knees because I am going to be a 220-pound guy eventually. I'm still growing a little bit. So he's number 9 on the list. So I'm literally just going to line him up and knock him down. But I'm actually super excited because if I do end up getting that win, then the next person in line for me is Dale, Deadly Dale.
Man, his match was really impressive at Armageddon too.
Yeah. So I would love to have, I always bug Dale about having a match. When we come down there, we're on a team, but up here, we haven't pulled. He's super strong, but I think I have lanes there too, but he's the guy who I need to get stronger for. So I think it's really fun.
And do you think there's a pretty big gap between them, or do you think they're pretty close? Because to me, Dale seems...
If I'm being completely honest with you, I think that the Alberta arm wrestling rankings are not done
way
properly.
Off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's how it works. If you're ranked number 1 and you pull in a tournament and I somehow meet you in the finals and you just had 5 crazy matches and I coasted my way to the final and then I beat you, I'm technically number 1 now. So actually Brian, Zach, and I, through the fingers, are developing a ranking system for Alberta, which we're going to expand. But we are going to set the rankings on what we believe. And in order to move up in the rankings, you have to beat that person in a super match. I think that's the best way to do it. And also with that, let's say we do that tournament thing and you're number 1 and I'm not even ranked, but I managed to beat you because of a luck of the draw. All that says is that I'm allowed to now call you out for a super match because I beat you in a tournament. So basically it just means that you have to defend yourself against me because I beat you, but it doesn't take the credibility of your rank away until I do beat you in a super match.
Yeah. Yeah, see, arm wrestling rankings, I really don't like how most of the systems work because a lot of it comes down to opinion or simple things like, oh, you beat him, so you just swap places or whatever. And I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I really like what Corey Miller's doing with the AIRS system.
Yeah.
I know it takes time. It takes time for it to be accurate, but you can upload old tournaments. So if you have 4 years worth of tournament history and you get that all in there, you probably have enough data that it's pretty spot on. And I wish more places would submit to his system because he already has it built out. And as far as I know, he doesn't, expect anything or charge anything or do anything like that. And it comes with its own bracket system and everything. So I wish more people would use that. But before we get too lost into there, your other call out is one that's close to home for me and one that I really think is interesting because we talk about Miles' talent, but if I'm being 100% honest to everyone I felt and to everyone, I think Declan has the highest upside talent of anyone I've ever felt. The guy, you said you heard me and Clifton's conversation. Yeah, he'll come into he'll take a couple months off. He'll come into a practice and he'll feel kind of mortal, okay, but mortal. And then the second practice, he's right there with everybody. And by the third practice, he's just blowing, he's a completely different person. His body somehow just adapts to it. And it's just, his hit becomes so hard. I think to me, I would really like to see him also versus Chuck Young, because I think that they might be pretty close. And I think Declan might even be better.
Did you know Chuck Young called me out? He wants to pull me. I'm like, okay, that'll happen. That'll happen. Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck's a really interesting puller. He's a really good guy, and he's been coming to practices more, which is great because he never came before. And being one of the better, more experienced guys in the area, we could definitely use someone who's as crafty as he is in the setup, because we're all very much just gripper and rippers. You probably found out from Armageddon and whatnot. So yeah, I'm liking having him around a lot, but a match with you guys would be really interesting too, because his hand, again, he's probably the other hand dominant guy here, and gripping up with him is very difficult.
Yeah.
So I would
He's been
definitely like to
around
see
forever.
that.
But yeah, no, well, here's how I look at it right now. Again, back to kind of marketing yourself. I think a smart thing to market yourself is to have matches that people want to see. And I think that when you kind of look from an Alberta perspective, I'm not the best, I'm not the strongest, but I am an up and coming young athlete with a lot of potential. And I think what's really fun at this point in my career is finding people with a lot of potential, and let's see who's like, you know what I mean? Let's put them up against each other. That's why I want Miles, up and coming guy, a lot of potential. Let's see where he's at. Against someone like me, been in a little longer, but I'm kind of, just doing my best to work my way up the ranks. And the same thing with Declan. And I think the fun thing too is like, I know how to kind of talk in a way that I feel like I can get these guys a little more invested than, if they got a random match on some random Tuesday.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
No, actually, that's a matter. Like, I want someone to get Declan interested enough that he's motivated to arm wrestle on the stage like that, because um that would just be cool to see. Like I said, to me, he's one of the people I really want to get bit by the bug and see what he can do in the sport. And I think that you would be a very good person to get him in there and get him serious, because he's not just going to be able to he's not just going to be able to like walk in and kind of like run through you or not take you seriously.
Well,
Like
yeah.
he would have to train, you know?
Well, and that's just so fun to me too, because as much as I love winning, I love bringing out the best in people. I love making the sport better. Like, I'd love to be looked upon one day and the people like Dakota, like he's like one of the best in the world at arm wrestling. But I would also love for people to go, oh, yeah, Dakota, like he made the sport what it is today. Like, we want to be super thankful to have him. And so that's why I like to try and promote, bring people in. I got to get a little bit better at posting on my YouTube, but I do want to get to a point one day where I'm like Auden or Milo, where they post stuff, gets 40,000 views, people are invested, it gets more people in the sport. I just need to be more consistent with it because I know I can get there. But no, totally. And I'll tell you what, I would love to, whether it's on this channel, on my channel, on Through the Fingers, I would love to get you, me, and Declan on one time, because I saw it on Facebook, but I'll say it again here. April 5th, I want to absolutely smack him. I do. I want to show all the guys in Montana who keep doubting me that you keep lining them up, I'll keep knocking them down. Like, I just have so much fun coming down to Montana, and I think it's a really fun rivalry with you guys, because as much as it's serious, it's also like, we're all good buddies after, and it's gonna be great. I mean, he should get training though, because if he does accept, that is only pretty much 2 months away now. And he better start hitting the weights like crazy, because that's the thing about these other people too, is like these guys who don't train a little bit and train a little bit, like it's fine and dandy. But when you get put up against somebody like me, or who's constantly training, you might think you have an idea of where I'm at, but when the match comes around, you have no idea unless you're also progressing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I feel like we haven't really found the secret sauce in arm wrestling yet, like what really makes for a great arm wrestler. Because like with Clifton, and we were talking about like his hard work versus John Therian, who just shows up and arm wrestles and somehow beats everybody without doing anything specifically to be a better arm wrestler, Like, is there anything in your head that you've kind of come to, where you're just like, this is what makes someone really good at arm wrestling? Because I feel like you look at the different body types of great arm wrestlers, there's nothing that really stands out to me as like, this guarantees you winning, and this guarantees you, or this guarantees that you're going to have potential. So what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts on that are, the first thing I think of is, I think that's why arm wrestling is a sport that separates itself from every other sport, is because look at basketball. What makes you better at basketball? Being
Being
taller.
tall.
Look at football. Depending on the position, football's a little more in depth, but there's certain weights, there's certain heights for certain positions.
Yes.
You look at soccer, they kind of all generally have the same build. Baseball is a little bit different, but generally it's them heavy hitter guys or really fast guys. It kind of gets broken down into some categories. But when you look at arm wrestling, every single build has potential. Every single build, because of the weight classes and stuff. And even when you look at the supers, there's 5'5" guys who are 300 pounds going up against 6'7" guys who are 300 pounds. And I think that what makes a good arm wrestler is understanding. I don't really tell this to people all the time, but I think about this all the time. When people like watch one specific arm wrestler and they train just like them, it's like, I'll use Devin as an example because a lot of people in Canada do that. But it's like, if you were to watch from the first day Devin started training to where Devin is now, he went through a whole like ph- philosophical journey to get to where he is right now. And he had his own trials and errors. He had what worked for him and what didn't. And you can't just look at what Devin's training right now and think that you're going to be able to do that and become the arm wrestler that you are. Because you need to go on your own journey of finding what works for you, what doesn't work for you, where you're strong, where you're weak, where you're genetically better, where you're genetically worse, where you want to be, where you don't want to be. And when you put all that together and you finally make a blueprint for your own self, that is what makes you a good arm wrestler.
Yeah, I totally agree. My journey with it has been a little bit different where when I first started, do you know Brandon Allen? So initially, because I was coming from a powerlifting background, I thought we'd speak the same language. So I kind of started working with him, got a training program through him, did that for a few months, learned the basics, took away what worked really good from that. And then when I kind of felt like I've learned his methods, then I switched to training with Hermes for a while in his system. Being like a hard inside puller like I am, I'm just too dumb to top roll. That didn't really feel like the greatest fit. So then I moved to Sandris, and now I'm with Lachlan. And I feel like every single person I've worked with, I've taken so much good stuff away, even if it wasn't always like the greatest fit, where like I feel like I really found a good place for me with Lachlan. But I totally feel what you're saying, because I feel like there's going to become a point where I just need, when I get good enough, I'm going to know exactly what I'm going to want to do and how to fine tune everything I've learned into what works for me. And I think I'm getting close to that point where I can really do like what you said, and just create my own training and be able to really progress to that next level that I've been kind of like feel like tiptoeing close to for a little while.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's just the whole thing of like what Lachlan does, what Hermes does, what Michael Todd does, what Devin does, what whoever does might work for some people in some aspects. But if you follow, like, you have to also find what works for you. And I think that's super important because whether you like it or not, you're like, I'm not the same build as Devin. I don't have the same arm length as Devin. Well, yes, Devin's pronation lift might work for me for pronation strength, but I might not be able to do his hook training the same way because he is able with his long lever to hook like that. Whereas maybe me with a bit shorter of an arm than him, I would have to hook differently. So I would need to train differently. Just things like that.
Absolutely.
And I guess what I'll touch on too is the whole table time versus weights. Like
100, yeah.
weights are never gonna not benefit you. The only thing I would tell people is you have to remember that when you're arm wrestling, you're working out everything. You're working out your tendons, you're working out your bones, you're working out your muscles. So I think that's why you can see some people and you can tell, like, I'll use Mason DeRossi as an example, because I know you saw him pull Aiden at the Country Folk thing. He doesn't look like he's the strongest guy, but because his tendons are so trained and he does more like calisthenic climbing things, he is just super strong in a tendon perspective. Whereas you look at like some people who do lots of weights, their muscles are really strong. But I would just recommend to anyone who focuses more on the weight side to make sure that you're working weights in a way where you're also straining your tendons and bones, because
Yeah.
that's how arm breaks will happen, is on people who come into the sport who have super strong muscles, but they've just been bodybuilding or whatever, and then they get into a spot where they're not really using their muscle, they're using a tendon or a bone, and that's when it breaks. But
Yeah.
and you got to remember, like, as much as John Tarian says like, oh, I don't do any weight training, he does very scientific table time. Like, he'll grip up with somebody, and if he knows that his riser's been getting dumped all week and who he's pulling has a really strong riser, then he's at the table and he's just rising with them, or he's just mating. And in a sense, that's really just technically like weight training, but to a more particular perspective, because if you can hold my rise and exactly cause it to dump to the weight it needs to be, then you're being way more specific than a weight. Because
Oh, yeah.
maybe it takes, 47.8321 pounds to cause my riser to dump. It too is too much, and 47.380 I can pull up. So it's about having people that you can train comfortably with that can literally get you to the exact percentage. Whereas a weight, you can still get stronger, but you can't hit it that close because you might just have, 45 pounds on and you can rise 45 pounds. But if you don't have 1 pound weights, you might have to up it to, 47.50. And then you can't rise that. So you just make do with what you have. But either way, as long as you're getting stronger, I think Josh DeVoe told me this. He's a guy from one of our clubs up here. His strength will never be a weakness. And I really think that's a great quote because
Never. Yeah.
because as long as you're getting stronger and you're using table to refine things, you're just going to be a better arm wrestler. One thing I do want to jump on though, sorry, I'm just taking so much of your time here, is
No, this is a conversation I wanted to have with you. I wanted to hear your thoughts. So feel free to just go
perfect.
all out.
Yeah. I think we're at a point where we're lucky too. We're like how you just said, you were with someone's training program, then jump somewhere else, then jump somewhere else, and jump somewhere else. That wasn't a thing, 10, 15 years ago. They weren't arm wrestling training programs. So that's where we're seeing these people who are younger, newer into the sport being better, faster. Like when you look at Devin and you go back on his YouTube and you watch him throughout the years, he literally was like, okay, I'm going to try this and see if it works. And he would trial it for 3 weeks and it either worked or it didn't. And then he would change it or he would keep it. Whereas we don't have to do that anymore because these people have tried this stuff and the things that don't work got thrown to the garbage. So now it's more or less these 4 things work really good. You pick the one that works best for you. That's why we're seeing people progress so much faster. And then obviously with the influx of people in the sport, you can have more positions where it's like, people are training more, doing it more, and they're just getting stronger.
And are you a person who likes to like do something for arm wrestling every day, like even if it's something simple like blood flow, or are you a person that likes to have like very scheduled time off, or what does that
The
look
only
like for you?
scheduled time off I really give myself is when I am like week out before a super important match. I tend to take 5 to 7 days off just to let everything, like my tendons harden up, my wrists feel good, everything like that. But, in a more like general perspective, I don't really take time off and I do something every day for it. Like I have, even if it's just a little gyro ball that I have for hand and wrist, like I'll sit there, but I'm bad at just doing blood flow. Like I will be like, okay, I'm just going to do some blood flow. Then it turns into me competing with myself on how long I can have the gyro ball in my hand. Then my whole forearm's blown up. My thumb is pumped. And then I'm like, why did I even do this? But I like the arm wrestling perspective in a sense too, because I think it literally goes all the way back to like primal times of like, I think upper body's just more fun. I genuinely am convinced that upper body's more fun.
It is.
So it
Yeah.
just correlates to everything better. And with like hands and forearms and stuff, like I don't work in a super extensive work environment. Actually, this is so funny. I've literally thought about changing my career to something where I have to work more with my hands so that I can just become a better arm wrestler because of it. Because I feel these guys who do like super hand intensive working and then they get so much better. And I'm like, I could just do that. But also because I don't do that, I feel like I need to do something every day. And your hands and forearms recover so fast. They're like I've done like 3 forearm workouts, just like wrist curls and stuff in a day. And then the next day I don't feel any soreness at all. The only time I really feel sore is after an intense practice. And usually it's more elbows, like kind of the shoulders, things like that. It's not even my forearm and wrist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to say to that too, just because there's a guy in our club, Dan Grosslack, who is very much a student of the sport. Like he thinks about everything. He's always trying to do little things to be better. He takes it extremely serious and he's very, very good. But one of the things he started getting interested in last year was his right hand has traditionally been very inconsistent, where some days it shows up and he just doesn't lose, and other days he just, he can't even get in a match. And rather than think it was a weakness, because when he's like training and lifting, it's not that far off from his left hand. But his thought was, and I think this makes perfect sense, is like the difference in coordination between your hands. So he started doing little things like with Dan was that his new thing is like, in order to build his coordination, he started thinking about becoming more ambidextrous. So like writing with his offhand or just doing day-to-day tasks with his offhand just to build that coordination. And he feels like he's seen improvements in his hands' ability to like react and adapt. And we've seen this in powerlifting too, where a lot of people, especially conventional deadlifters, they'd get to a point in their deadlift where they couldn't hold on to the bar, like their grip, like one hand would always let go. And the problem was very rarely grip strength. And what they found is by having people do something like learning how to play guitar, you know, with their offhand or something, building that mind muscle connection into that hand was all that it needed in order to become proficient. And also now they're holding on to the weight that they could never hold on to before, not through training grip or not through training anything like that. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see his match with RJ Harold and see if he's been able, if that's a way to work through that. And I do want to talk too, since the armbender's coming up, what are your like top 3 matches that you're looking forward to most in this?
Honestly, Clifton pull John, of course. Like that's got to be one that's up there for me. I want to see Joe pull Jordan Sill.
Yes,
And
that's
then
huge for me.
yours and Dalton. I think those are the same 3 I said on my interview or my posting on YouTube. But I think you and Dalton is really fun because you guys are just gonna. I don't know. After talking to you, it might be a little different than what I think. But I think you guys are just gonna sit there in the hook and go at it, or at least for one round. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah, we had a practice this last Saturday, and just to put a little something in his head, I showed him a little things that he might not have been expecting, and he was a little worried.
That's no.
And yeah, I think it's going to be really good, but it might be a little different. It might look a little different than you guys are expecting.
Yeah, fair enough. Honestly, though, I'm just excited for the card and to be down there. Every time I come to Great Falls, I have a great time. It's great to see everybody again. I know the Friday is going to be fun. Like Josh Wilson asked if I'd grab a mic, interview some guys during the weigh-ins, and then afterwards, just kind of get ready. And then Saturday's like super fun all day, and then get to compete. Afterwards, I'll get to watch, commentate. Then when it's done, it's like kind of like a breath of relief. Everyone sits there, hangs out, people arm wrestle, have a few drinks, and then next day to get going back. So no, I'm just kind of pumped in general.
Yeah, it's hard not to get, because you know you've seen these events and you've been to them. It's impossible not to get hyped. You know, that music starts playing, you're doing your walkout, you're coming out. They take it super serious. The crowd in Great Falls is so good. They're so about arm wrestling. Like they pump you up. They're yelling your name. It is such an experience. And anyone who's in the area or anyone who hasn't seen something like I said earlier, we're doing big things here in Montana, and I think this is like a really, really great launching point for a lot of people that we're going to be seeing a lot in the future, and I think you're one of them. And I'm just really excited to see where we go with all this. Like, I can't tell you, like, I wish this happened too. Like, I've been ready for so long. Like, I wish it already happened in a way, you know? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I'm actually pumped too because I keep bugging like David Gelder, the guy who runs Red Lake Studios, for those of you that don't know. But I want to box somebody, and then I want to arm wrestle them because he's been doing the slap fight boxing trifecta thing.
yeah.
I want to find someone who's a good arm wrestler or like has maybe a boxing background, but is an okay arm wrestler. But I want to box somebody and then I want to arm wrestle or vice versa. I think that would be so much fun because I have a little bit of boxing background myself.
Your weight's a little bit too off, but the only person I could think of would maybe be Hunter, who would be into that.
Yeah.
But he's like 160-ish for the most part.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, wouldn't it be fun to just like, even if someone like has had like some amateur experience, but maybe no arm wrestling, and then I have like my little bit of boxing and then my arm wrestling, and then we could just kind of vice versa. And I think that'd be super fun.
I think it would be fun. And I think it's, you know, right now is the time to be bold and try new things. And that would be really cool and interesting to see. And hey, chess streamers are boxing now.
That's what I'm saying.
So if chess streamers are boxing, I think arm wrestlers can too.
I think there's something so pure about just like getting punched in the face and punching someone in the face. And I really think that from like someone's perspective, where if like they were a boxer, like technically for them, they'd have a lot less to lose. Because if I beat them in an arm wrestle, it's like, oh, okay, like he pinned my arm. Whereas like I'm getting in the ring, like they can beat the crap out of me if they want, like if they're good enough, right? So
yeah, boxing for sure. I have zero interest in slap, but boxing, that might be something to think about. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm totally gonna like you're gonna see it one day. You're like, oh, Dakota actually got it to happen. Like I'm gonna be coming down to Great Falls. I'm gonna be arm wrestling, and then I'm gonna be boxing. It's gonna be really fun.
Do you have any names at all, like in mind, or
I have no names at all. That's why I've like really I want to go to a
trying to
couple.
think? I know a lot of arm wrestlers do like judo and jujitsu, but I can't think of any that have ever talked about boxing. And I know recently I heard, like I said, heard Hunter talking about mixed martial arts, but yeah, boxing, that's like I said, if chess people are doing it, then we don't really have an excuse, right?
Well, and the thing is too is like another thing with the whole marketing sense, like you were saying, like I feel like there's a lot of influencer boxing that's going on right now, and I feel
Yeah.
like that's a good way. Like if there's like a good match that happens, because like I'll use James English as an example because I met him when I was in Florida. But like he jumped into arm wrestling and he's a huge name and he brought a lot of eyes to it. But how cool would it be if you like convinced an influencer one day to do like maybe an influencer who's good at boxing to box and then you arm wrestle them or something like that and you bring more out
Yeah.
or get a little payday on the side, things like that, right? That just are so much fun. Because I think we have a really, like you said, in Montana, we're really lucky with Red Leg because what they're doing is like high enough level to like when you watch like some of these DAZN events or when you watch Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, like Gelder was there helping film. He knows how to
Yeah.
do these things. And he's going to have events like that one day of his own eventually. So you might as well get on the train right now and enjoy it.
Oh, it's coming for sure. Yeah, with him and Josh and all the great things they're doing, it's just it's going to set a new level or a new standard for quality. Where if you can't even get within a certain distance of that, then you're just like that mom and pop um tournament that's like in the back of a bar somewhere. Where like I've even told promoters of small tournaments, invest in a 10 by 20 vinyl with like your logo, like all black vinyl with your logo just running north to south across it, to hang in the back behind the table, so that way when people are filming it, it looks professional.
Yeah.
You're that alone is going to make your production get way more popular, because people want what they can post to social media, right?
100%.
And if they just see some random Joe Bob from down the street with a beer spilled down in the side of his shirt in the background versus a professional, just even of, like I said, just a vinyl hanging up back there, it makes a huge difference. But no promoters are like willing to invest anything into like these tournaments. And like, I get it that a lot of them are just people who've been arm wrestling for a long time and they just really like to be a part of the sport and whatnot. But like, don't complain that people just want to do super matches now if you're not doing anything to make your tournament appealing to people.
Yeah. No, I agree. And yeah, Josh Wilson's doing a lot of great things too. I haven't really, the reason I didn't really talk about his name with that is just because I haven't seen him touch on like anything other than arm wrestling, but I know that he's really all in with that arm wrestling. And I think his arm benders are really good. I'm super excited to be a part of it. I hope that regardless of the outcome, I'm going to be back for another one, which isn't like, again, why I like to have fun when I'm there and promote myself, because I think as much as it is important to be a good arm wrestler, I think it's important to when I'm on a card, I know that people who wouldn't normally watch are going to be watching because I'm on that card. And I think that's a really valuable thing to bring to a promotion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that was a great conversation. But before we wrap up for the night, is there anyone you want to shout out or anything you want to say to leave people with?
No, I'm not going to shout out anybody, but I am going to tell Miles that I hope he's been training hard. I know he said he's coming back up to Canada to go to Medicine Hat one more time. Hopefully they're showing him the right things, and don't freeze up when we get to the table, man. Just like any freeze ups and he's going to be in for a rough day.
Oh yeah, I think if either one of you make a mistake, it'll be a rough day for sure. But I really enjoyed that conversation. I definitely have some content in mind for the future that I'd love to have you on. I'll talk to you about that later. But for everyone who tuned in, thanks for watching. And I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and we will catch you guys next time.